Hey.
The Utah Jazz are a very interesting franchise. I think it's safe to say that if you were to go out and poll NBA Twitter about which franchise in the NBA was least respected, the Utah Jazz will win by an absolute landslide. And while I feel like the hate does go a bit too far sometimes, I do understand why it's a thing. Between the infamous atmosphere in the Utah arena that has been noted by several players, most notably Vernon Maxwell, and the fact that they got big brothered by Michael Jordan and the Bulls the only time they've had a true contender in the NBA, you just start to realize why the Jazz have been a punching bag for so long for NBA fans. Oh, not to mention their franchise's best player in history is also just a terrible person, which, if you don't know why, feel free to investigate that yourself. Okay, Jazz fans, before you click off, I'm sorry for all the slander to start the video. I'm simply just setting the scene. From here on out, it's good vibes, I swear to it. Because even though all this bad stuff has happened in Jazz history, they made a choice back in 2017 that would give them an opportunity to write themselves a better future. And so far, they've partially delivered. If you don't know by now, that 2017 choice was the decision to trade for Donovan Mitchell on draft night. Which, may I interject, that trade simply just looks like an absolute steal now. As a reminder, the Nuggets got Trey Lyles and Tyler Lydon in return for Donovan Mitchell, which Trey Lyles is now on his 4th team in 7 years. As for Tyler Lydon, don't hate yourself if you've never heard of him, he was out of the league after 2 years. Anyway, Donovan Mitchell immediately exploded onto the NBA scene despite being the 13th overall pick in his draft. He immediately had more impact than big names like Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, and Dennis Smith Jr. Mitchell was even playing up to the level of guys like Jason Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, and Ben Simmons. More on him in a second. In fact, to this day, Donovan Mitchell remains the best scorer, at least statistically, from this draft class since day one by a pretty sizable margin. Back to Ben Simmons though. I hope we all remember the Rookie of the Year battle between Mitchell and Simmons because that was easily one of the more fun races that we've seen for an NBA award in quite some time. Because we've had close Rookie of the Year races in the past, but these guys took it to a whole new level. It all started when Ben Simmons said in an interview that there were no other rookies that year that had impressed them to that point in the season, which Donovan Mitchell took offense to, and then we would see him show up to a game a few days later wearing a hoodie that read the dictionary definition of the word rookie. This of course pointing out the fact that Ben Simmons, although he was technically a rookie, was in his 2nd year in the NBA after missing his entire 1st year due to a foot injury. Then after that, there was some light back and forth in media quotes between, Simmons saying this, Mitchell saying that, yada yada yada. Then finally, at the awards show where the Rookie of the Year was going to be announced, Donovan Mitchell pulled up in a van that simply just had the phrase rookie with a question mark on the outside of the van. At the end of the day, it was Simmons' 16-8-8 stat line versus Mitchell's 24-4 stat line, and Simmons would end up winning the award after helping Philly get back into the playoffs after the infamous trust the process era. For what it's worth, I still think Mitchell should have won the award, but who really even cares about Rookie of the Year awards anyway? Either way, outside of that award, Mitchell has been a very consistent winner since entering the league. It's not quite noticeable because the Jazz actually won 3 less games in the previous season during his rookie year, but context is necessary here. The 2017 Jazz were led by a young Rudy Gobert having a breakout season, partnered with first-time All-Star Gordon Hayward who seemed to be entering his peak. And behind one of the greatest defenses in the NBA that year, this team would go 51-31 and ultimately lose in the 2nd round of the playoffs. Then in the offseason, Gordon Hayward leaves for the Celtics, and the only noticeable signings that the Jazz make is bringing on point guard Ricky Rubio, which is a pretty noticeable drop-off. No offense, Ricky Rubio. That is, until Donovan Mitchell showed up and averaged 20 points a night and ultimately helped lead the Jazz to a 48-34 record during his rookie season. And in the years since, the Jazz have now finished with season-long records of 50-32, 44-28, and then 52-20 in the most recent season when they held the best record in the entire NBA. And throughout that same time period as well, Donovan Mitchell also continued to improve every single year until he has fully proven himself to be one of the premier scoring guards in the entire NBA. A long way to come for someone who was originally the 13th pick in his entire draft class. But to wrap this video up, I want to talk about the portion of Donovan Mitchell's career that has easily been the most impressive part of it to me. And that's his performance in the playoffs. No matter who you think is good or bad in the NBA, one commonality that every NBA fan seems to have is that everyone seems to respect players that always go above and beyond when the games matter most come springtime. Which is why I find it really confusing that Donovan Mitchell is yet to earn the respect of a lot of fans, despite the fact that he has consistently been magnificent in the playoffs every single year of his career so far. Even in his first playoff action as a rookie, he handled the higher seeded Thunder led by Russ and PG in just 6 games. Mitchell would end up finishing that series averaging 28.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. Then, contrary to the rest of this video, he did take a hit in production during his next 2 playoff series, where he lost both times to the James Harden and CP3-led Houston Rockets in the second round of 2018 and the first round of 2019. Across all 10 games in those series, Donovan Mitchell only averaged 20 points per game as he struggled with efficiency, finishing with shooting splits of 34, 25, and 78. And while I'm not going to try and go out of my way a whole lot to defend these series, because let's just face it, Donovan Mitchell played some pretty awful basketball, I do think it's fair to say that you would probably expect a first and second year primary scorer to have his struggles against a team like the Rockets, who during this time period in the playoffs were second only to the absolutely goated Golden State Warriors, who had KD, Steph, and Clay. Either way, after those series were done, Mitchell put those bad playoff performances behind him and bounced back huge in 2020 when playing in the NBA bubble. In what was perhaps the greatest first round series in the entirety of NBA history, Donovan Mitchell dueled Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series where Mitchell averaged 36, 5, and 5 on absolutely ridiculous 53, 52, 95 shooting splits. Not to mention, he had multiple 50-point performances in the series, something that's only been done by a handful of people in the entirety of NBA history. And yes, the Jazz did blow a 3-1 lead in this series. That's part of the reason why it was such a great series in itself. But never in my life will I ever put the blame on Donovan Mitchell for losing this series. Again, he simply had one of the best all-time series performances that the NBA has ever seen, and it was just amazing stuff. If you ever find yourself bored with a whole lot of time, I definitely recommend rewatching that series. It was just so good. And then finally, in these most recent playoffs, we saw Mitchell continue to just deliver great numbers time and time again, despite playing through an ankle injury that caused him to miss not only the last 16 games of the regular season, but even caused him to miss the first game in the postseason. Despite that though, the Jazz gentlemen swept the Grizzlies in round 1, but then they suffered a pretty bad loss to the partially Kawhi-less Clippers in round 2. But again, Donovan Mitchell was nowhere near the one to blame for this loss. Throughout the entirety of the playoffs, he averaged 32, 4, and 5 on 48, 44, 83 shooting splits. Again, all while battling an ankle injury that was noticeably affecting him over and over again throughout this playoff run. So as we look ahead to the next season for the Utah Jazz, expectations have to remain high. It's safe to say they've hit that point in their team's career where no one's really going to care quite what they do in the regular season. They're only going to care about what they produce in the playoffs because, we all know what they can do in the regular season. They can win games and they can get a high seed, but they've struggled in the playoffs, so that's all people are going to care about. In terms of their roster construction, they're returning all of the important players from last season, as well as including wing depth like Rudy Gay and Eric Pascal, as well as finally getting a decent Rudy Gobert backup for the first time in his career in Hassan Whiteside. So assuming there are no major injuries to this team, the Utah Jazz should remain in that top tier of Western Conference contenders for the year. One thing that's absolutely not up for question is that Donovan Mitchell will continue to be a great player. And I'm sorry to say this to any of the Rudy Gobert truthers out there, but this is Donovan Mitchell's team. He's been the driving force since arriving in Utah his rookie season, and while Gobert has been in great 1B to Mitchell's 1A, I just would not feel confident in any team aspiring to be a championship team that claims Rudy Gobert as their MVP, because that scenario is just never ever happening. So I really hope Mitchell starts to get more respect, and not only with the team MVP status, but with the league MVP status as well. Because let's be real, there's no way that half of this list should be ahead of the best player on the team with the best record in the entire league. Overall, if Donovan Mitchell can stay healthy next year and produce a stat line somewhere around the likes of 28, 6, and 5, while the Jazz secure another top 2 seed in the West, I see no reason why that's not at least worthy of a top 5 finish in MVP voting for this next season. Mitchell is that good, he's been that good since arriving in Utah, And it's about damn time that the man gets some respect from the league. I know he's in Utah. I know we all collectively hate Utah as a meme. But Donovan Mitchell is a special talent. He's just barely reaching his peak, so there's still some time for him to improve and grow as a player. Overall, again, he's just another guy that I'm very excited to see what he has next, because he definitely has a chance to be a huge difference maker for Utah just this year and for the future. And overall, he's just a really special player. And if you've made it to this point in the video, then congratulations, you're a real one. Now, if you enjoyed this video, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button. Should be somewhere in this general direction. Or if you're not sure yet, maybe check out another video which should be in this general direction. Either way, thank you for watching.